Hey, miracle workers. I'm Kevin Rice, and I'm with you each and every week on Thursday nights at 7 o'clock Eastern Time in West Palm Beach. And today I am talking about The Way of Mastery, this book here. And I started this, it's 35 lessons in here, and I've only read up to lesson 15. And thank you so much for doing this for me, Aaron. And so we're going to go through and finish going through lesson 1 here. And if you haven't seen it before, just go to the last 2 weeks. It's on our website, the Academy of Spiritual Awakening. And you can watch the previous videos there as well. And folks, I cannot forget as well about A Course in Miracles based on the handwritten notes of Helen Schuckman. And that's available on our website, the Academy of Spiritual Awakening. And hello, Dave. It's good to see you, my friend. And so let's get into what we're talking about this evening. You know, first of all, lesson 1 is called The Way of Calling You Back Home. And that is exactly what you and I are going through each and every day, every minute of every hour of every day. Okay, understanding who we are and our identity, and beginning to align ourselves with that identity, and letting go instead of that self-constructed identity that we ourselves have done in our lives. Hi, Maritza. Good to see you, my friend. So I want to start here with a portion of lesson 1 of The Way of Mastery here. And Brian Herrera, love you so much, my friend. I miss you so much. I assume that you're going through A Course in Miracles with us as well. From The Way of Mastery, it says this: I speak from experience that separation is an illusion. When death occurs in your plane, in that very moment, you still have the power to choose to recognize that something has changed and to shift your attention to a different faculty that the body could never possibly contain. One in which you perceive and hear and communicate with that spark of divine light, the soul, that seems to have given up the idea of trying to keep a physical form animated. This is imperative. In fact, it is the very first step of the way of the heart. Keep in mind, as we go through The Way of Mastery, we're talking about the first section, the first book within this book, The Way of the Heart. And the second one is The Way of Transformation, and the third one is The Way of Knowing. All of which is absolutely powerful. So let's talk about the way of the heart. You know, I've gone through A Course in Miracles nearly for 30 years, teaching it, becoming a student of it as well. Hi, Michelle. And I want to let everybody know A Course in Miracles per se is about the theoretical foundation of the Course. We understand that. But we understand as well that there is a heart mechanism within us to extend and to express the love of God to a world that is in desperate need of it. And that's why I'm here right now, is to extend that love to you right now. And this is important. So before I when I'm speaking about this portion here, I just invite you right now to acknowledge in this moment the presence of God's love. Okay? God's love. That's it. God is with us. Acknowledge that sacred experience that you and I are going through right now. That is our journey. That is our journey. Hi, Tara. Good to see you, my friend. So when it starts here, I speak from experience that separation is an illusion. My friends, this is the first step the first notion that we entertain in our collective mind. This entertainment that we give our attention to is the notion that the separation itself is real. And what I'm here to offer to you, my holy brothers, my brothers and sisters, is that the notion of the separation is itself the reason why we are here in time and space, is because we gave our energy, our power, our attention to something that is a fallacy, an untruth. Okay? Right now, we are exchanging molecules between each other. And the only thing that is separating me from you and you from me is that belief, that untruth, that you're separate from me and I am separate from you. So the moment that I see that there is a subject here called Kevin Rice and a object out there, okay, Tony, for instance, hi Tony, that's what I'm talking about. That is where the separation occurs. A belief that there's something here and something else there outside of myself. And there is nothing whatsoever. We are one. I know that this is very persistent in a lot of people in this realm. Okay? For instance, my spouse is a meteorologist. Okay? He's a scientist. And I know that he believes in the separation and he can measure it within this dream state as much as he wants to. And by the way, he's here right now and he's hearing me right now too. And that's fine. We have a different interpretation of the way that we are approaching the world. Nevertheless, I know in the deepest part of my being that when we experience that unity, that oneness that we were created to experience, then we know that that is the evidence that we are looking for in our lives. That is the moment that I can set aside easily with laughter this notion that I am separate from what I am experiencing in time and space. Okay? I speak from experience that separation is an illusion. And when death occurs in your plane, in that very moment you still have the power to choose to recognize that something has changed. This is how the separation was birthed. Okay? It was that we begin to entertain that notion that it might be a possibility in our experience. All right. So look, let me give you an example here about death, because that is the way of mastery is referring to it right now. Let me just say it again. When death occurs in your plane, in that very moment you still have the power to choose to recognize that something has changed. Okay, something has changed. Okay? And by the way, this is the reason why judgment occurs in time and space. Judgment is the belief that what God has created in perfection, sometime, some way, has changed. And that change is the reason why we experience ourselves in a dream state. The only venue in which an illusion like the separation can be afforded reality is within a dream state. Okay? I hope that you all understand that. So let's talk about death here just a few moments here. I can tell you, as I review what has happened in my experience, in my lifetime, in this plane of existence, I have experienced death, okay? When my mother passed away about 4 years ago. When my sister, about 2 years ago, passed away as well. When I had boyfriends, when I was 20, my boyfriend at that time killed himself. I can go on and on with this narrative of death easily. But in those moments, I can shift my attention to a different faculty. I can change my mind in that moment. Yeah, when I went through the experience with my mother's passing, for instance, I had to remind myself every day, okay, that loss is never loss if it is properly perceived. Okay? When we begin to shift our attention to a different faculty, okay? So that shifting does not occur by looking at our bodies. It does not occur when we see seemingly the loss of death in our experience. That shift occurs when we understand that what we are experiencing in time and space, hi Sarah, is merely us using the mind-body as a communication device. That's it. That this is not my body, that my mother's body is not her body either. That we live and move and abide in the mind of Christ. That's it. And everything else that we experience, every event, every circumstance, is merely a phenomenon. And that is it. This is exactly what Jesus went through his temptations as well. Every illusory figure began to arise in his field of awareness, and what did he do? He denied it because it was not true. Denying the denial of truth. And that is exactly what Buddha did with his temptations, as well as Jesus did as well. And this is what you and I have to do every day as well. To understand the illusory nature that happens and arises in the field of awareness. Okay? This is how our minds, our thoughts are so powerful, it can instantly change the world quickly. Okay, you shift your attention to a different faculty that the body could never possibly contain. The body itself is a limit. So when we tether ourselves and believing ourselves that we are a body in and of itself, we in that moment limit our ability to truly communicate to the world what we really want to desire, what we really want to commune with in our world, and that is the love of God. That's it. That is why I said last week, and I'll say it repeatedly in the future, that we want only loving thoughts in our field of awareness. Okay? And when something else occurs in our experience, when something arises in our mind that speaks of death, that speaks of loss, that speaks of limitation, that speaks of suffering, and so forth, or a lack of love. Okay, I have to acknowledge in this moment that I have done this thing. Okay, some level in my mind, our mind, has created an energy in our field of awareness that reflects what we have held and harbor in our minds. Somebody, a friend, a student, I guess, on Facebook Live yesterday, you'll remember who you are here, who reminded to me what Jesus said about a person who's experiencing lust for a woman. That a person who experiences that lust for another woman, that has already occurred because it occurred in the mind that harbored it. Okay? And when we release that attention, that affection, that fixation rather, then we begin to have another experience. Because in that moment, we can choose again. We can choose again. One in which you perceive and hear and communicate with that spark of divine light, the soul that seems to have given up the idea of trying to keep a physical form animated. This is imperative. In fact, it is the very first step of the way of the heart. This is the realization that in this moment, you're not a body, okay? That is a limitation. That is a fence that you yourself and I have to created ourselves around a splendid and magnificent mind that has been given to us by our source. So keep that in mind, okay? So the first step in awakening then is this, from the way of mastery. Nothing that you experience is caused by anything outside of you. You experience only the effects of your own choice. I want to say this again because I understand that you and I understand it fully, okay? Nothing that you experience is caused by anything outside of you. You experience only the effects of your own choices. Look, I have used this. This will be the third time that I am actually using this allegory or the imagery given to us by Jesus, right? That this right now that you're looking at is the pool of awareness, right? And the moment, briefly here, that we take a pebble of fear into that pool of awareness, we are going to experience the effects, the ripples that comes from dropping that pebble of fear into our field of awareness, our pool of awareness. When I instead begin to experience the ripples of love, that is because I have myself have placed within this pool of awareness a pebble full of love. Okay? So you say, Kevin, I don't like what I'm experiencing in time and space right now. Well, guess what? You are responsible for what you are experiencing right now. The world, the events, the circumstances, quote unquote, outside of ourselves is in itself neutral. Okay? It's neutral. It has no charge at all. Okay? Nothing that is occurring in time and space cannot add anything to my identity. It cannot subtract anything from who I am. It does not change me at all, because in itself it is an effect and therefore cannot cause my unhappiness. It cannot be the source. It cannot be the reason that I am blaming anybody or anything or any organization in time and space, because I myself take full responsibility for what I have placed within the pool of awareness, okay? Hi, Axel. It's good to see you, my friend. Let me see who else is here. Susan Kavanaugh. I love you so much, Susan. Tony Lewitz. I miss you so much. Hello, brother. I appreciate you're enjoying this. Michelle. Marlita. All of you people are joining with us here right now on Facebook Live. And I really enjoy this experience that I'm having with you. And by the way, if you have any questions here, let me know. I've got your questions here. I can answer everything that you are asking if you have a question here. Okay, let me go on here. Where it says as well, the way of the heart, that pathway which cultivates within you the decision to turn your attention upon your own mind. Okay, in other words, you are placing your attention upon you, your mind, the mind of God, the mind of Christ, your mind, which is the same as those things. And you turn away from the experience of time and space, because you and I are an eternal created person and being. And so this is why the disappointment comes when we begin to give our attention to that which is temporary. A Course in Miracles says that God is as incapable of creating the temporal as the ego is as incapable of creating eternity. You see this? Okay? This is why time and space, and Einstein said it very clearly as well, that it is an optical illusion that we are interacting with at any moment. Upon your behavior as well as your mind as well, upon what is true and real for you moment to moment, to study it, to consider it, to feel it, to breathe the light of spirit through it, and to constantly retrain the mind so that it assumes complete responsibility in each moment. In each moment. My God. People don't want to take full responsibility. Okay? And in those moments, you begin to give your power that has been given to you, your inheritance, your legacy, your love, your joy to somebody outside of your mind. That's what we do. You want to be at peace, don't you? I want to be at peace too. And when we understand and bring a realization that the first step that brings us conflict and war is a choice that I myself have made. Period. Okay? And when we believe that we have full responsibility of what is experiencing in time and space, then our world begins to change almost instantly. Okay, we begin to operate as who we are, Christ incarnate in time and space. And the purpose and the function that we bring to time and space is to help people gently and gingerly to become aware of our identity as a beautiful creation from our source, from the creator of everything that is real and tangible in time and space. So why is this necessary? Because without it, there can be no peace. Without it, you cannot transcend the false identification that you have chosen. You need to come to the point where you say to yourself, I have done this to myself. I did it. I must correct it. No one is to blame. The world is innocent. So let me just bring this. Hi, Diane. It's good to see you, my holy sister there. Why is this necessary from the way of mastery? Because without it, there can be no peace. Let's just talk about that in that moment. You know, on the way here from Palm Beach, I was coming back with Aaron, and he saw a car in front of it with a bumper sticker that says peace. And that individual was not moving in a way, behaviorally, with his car rather, in a manner that did not resonate with Aaron at all. So he wanted the other car to go a little faster than he was going. And in that moment, Aaron says to me, hey, you know, I thought that he would drive properly. And I said, well, look at his bumper sticker there. It says peace. Maybe he wants peace instead. Maybe he wants peace. Why does he want peace? Why do I want peace? Why do you want peace? Okay, you want peace because that is your natural inheritance. That is your gift, the treasure that has been given to you to experience and to enjoy it and so forth. That is your desire to have the peace of God. And the way we go south immediately is when I say to myself, oh, hey, I've got a hierarchy of values that I'm holding in my mind. And wait a minute there. I see, for instance, Diana. I can say in that moment, oh, she has a different set of values from me. Okay, so my values are different from hers. And in that egoic moment, I can then say, oh, wait a minute. We've got two different values there, but my values are better than Diane. Okay? And the moment I believe that, the moment I give that attention or energy, then that is where peace turns into war. That is the reason why we are on the battlefield in the first place, is because we believed that single line of lie that says the separation is true. It's not true. It's not true. And you begin to understand the unity that rests beyond that when you and I begin to drop our lines and boundaries and divisions that we have ourselves, that we are responsible for do this, by created in our minds, our miscreated minds, when we give that any attention or give it any credibility whatsoever in our lives, okay? All right. Again, I'm here to answer any questions you have here. And I know what the ego-driven mind wants to do is to focus our attention instead upon the specifics within time and space. But what about this? What about that event? What about that circumstance? What about this awful person that I drove next to in the traffic? What about those things? Look, folks, we don't have several choices here. We have only two choices, only two voices in our experience. Okay? The voice of love, or whether we are listening to the voice of love. Okay, let me see if we have anything here. Yes, Susan, you're correct. You do own your separation when that occurs. In other words, you become one with what you have either miscreated in time and space, or whether you are experiencing and enjoy what occurs when we align ourselves with the voice of love. Hi, Axel. Susan, okay, Tony. You got perfect reception there. That's great. And Michelle and Maritza, good to see you all. Okay, any questions, folks? I am here for you. And thank you so much from the donation from somebody. I don't see who has done that yet, but I will. And thank you so much for your donations to the Academy of Spiritual Awakening. Okay, we've got a lot to talk about here. We still about 20, 30 minutes. I don't have to go a whole hour, but I do want to make sure that we are very thorough and exhaustive with what we are explaining together. Okay, it's very powerful that you and I understand this fully. So, here we are here. Why is this necessary? Because without it, there can be no peace. Without it, you cannot transcend the false identification that you have chosen. What is that false identification? That false identification is a voice of fear. We call it the ego. Okay? Your false and my false identification with the ego, it brings us an experience of suffering, because we are not an ego trapped within inside of a body. We are the Christ mind, and we can express that love from the mind of Christ beautifully. And when we do that, and when we live ourselves in the eternal timeless now, as opposed to the past and the future, then the voice of fear begins to dismantle and dissolve into the nothingness from which it was born. You want to be here and now. Okay? You want to be here now. And that is where the portal and the window of God's love begins to easily flow through you to a world that really wants to hear you and see you properly, to experience and interact with your true identity, the Christ incarnate, as opposed to a raucous and shrieking voice of fear that we ourselves have created and miscreated and entertain and give our attention and attention to each and every day. Okay. So we cannot transcend that voice of fear until we understand that what we have already created in time and space itself is an hallucination. The voice of fear is nothing more than a gnat shouting in space. That's it. And that is how we should regard it as such. Nothing more than a shadow against the wall. That's it. That's why it has no value. It cannot subtract anything from me or add anything to me or change me in any way at all. Okay, hi Maria, good to see you, my holy sister. You need to come to the point where you say to yourself, I have done this to myself, I did this, I must correct it. How do we correct it? We choose once again. We choose again. We see that we have chosen poorly before, but we can choose wisely instead. When we align ourselves with the thoughts of God, with the love of God, that is where we can choose again. And when we choose again, then our experience in this world begins to unfold in a way that you see yourself seeing the dream of suffering to change itself easily and gently into a dream of love. A dream of love, a dream of light, a dream of peace. Okay? And then you understand this. I hope that you do. Okay, I think we might have some other people. Look, Susan, you said you love the analogy to a gnat in space. And by the way, that's not from me. That's from the Way of Mastery. And by the way, the channel of the Way of Mastery, if you go to my post, you can see him there. And he did respond to my post, I think yesterday or the day before. And I will email him more fully in the next day or two. But it was very nice to interact with the scribe slash channel of the Way of Mastery. The same voice, by the way, of A Course in Miracles, which has been my precious book for the last 30 years. Okay. All right. So let me, I want to say the last thing that I really want to refer to here, where it says, I have done this to myself, I did it, I must correct it. We've already covered that. No one is to blame, okay? Look, the moment that I blame anybody for anything that I'm experiencing in time and space, that is a signal, a huge red flag that my egoic mind becomes more dense. It becomes more persistent in our mind. Okay? That is because I am trafficking in blame. I want to traffic in denial. Oh, this didn't come from me. It has to come from somebody else. Okay? That is where blame comes. And to whatever extent that you blame, or I blame anybody for anything else, to whatever extent we do, to that extent, we are living an illusion that our identification is founded and based in time and space and as an ego trapped within inside of a body. That itself is a limit. That itself is not who we are. We are a children of the light, a children of the day. And when we begin to align ourselves in that way, then our world begins to change in time and space. Here we go again in lesson 1 from the Way of Mastery. The way of the heart, let me just look here to make sure that we are covering everybody, and we are. The way of the heart is not the way of the intellect. For indeed, That aspect of the mind was never designed to be your master. It was designed to be humble. And if you will pardon the expression, very stupid servant of the awakened heart. Wow. That's powerful, isn't it? I love that. So, I want to really comment on this statement, one sentence here. For indeed, that aspect of the mind was never designed to be your master. Okay, that aspect is referring to the intellect. So look, man, the intellect is helpful in time and space. Sure, I don't want to deny that as well. I'm using the intellect right now in concert with the voice of God speaking through me right now. When you balance those things together, that is fine. But when we affix ourselves to the notion that the intellect is also on the same page as our temptation to be right every time, that is where suffering begins. The intellect is helpful, and it is useful under the leadership and the guidance of the Spirit within you and me. That's helpful. It is not helpful when we move ourselves into a notion that my temptation to be right every time and everybody else's interpretation is wrong. That is the first step into the descent toward hell. Folks, you think that peace and love and holiness is difficult. It's not. It's easy. It's so easy. We have made it through the guidance of the ego to make it very complex and difficult, and it's not. It's a simple choice that our own mind is making each and every second of every minute of every hour of every day. That is why your mind is so awesome and so powerful in this experience and this realm that we are going through together. So the mind was never designed to be your master. Hi, Wendy. Good to see you, my holy sister. I love you so much. And Aaron is looking at me. What are you looking at me for? Huh? Okay, you've got a bug on your hand. I got it. So I hope that you're at one with that bug, okay? Because, Aaron, it's true. That bug does not cause you to be unhappy, okay? It does not happen. Because all things in time and space are 100% neutral, okay? By the way, your thoughts, by the way, are not neutral. There is no such thing as an idle thought, okay? Every single thought that you think and harbor in your mind manifests itself in your realm, 100%. The moment that you try to deny that, then you are trafficking in blame. Okay, so the heart is that which feels all things, embraces all things, trusts all things, and allows all things. So let's take those 5 things here separately, because there is no separation anyway. The heart is that which feels all things. And by the way, I talk about this in chapter 5 of my book, The Game of Love, Changing the Rules Changes Everything, and that's on our website as well. And I talk about the feeling that we experience. We're not going to experience that feeling nature within ourselves as long as we are transfixed with the voice of fear, the ego. The voice of the ego traffics in emotions, okay? Emotions themselves are an effect of the illusion of fear that we attach ourselves to it. The feeling that we experience will be felt underneath those emotions. So we're never going to experience the feeling of love, for instance, unless we look directly into the emotions that we are entertaining at any moment. So the feeling of love, the feeling of holiness, the feeling of oneness begins to emerge within our being and our identity as we begin to express that to the world. But we're never going to feel that fully unless we, using the tools of the separation, the tools of the past and the future, to bring in our field of awareness an illusion that we can call an emotion. Emotions is temporary. It goes away. It comes and it goes. It is not permanent. And therefore, it is not a reflection of our identity, which is in itself eternal. Okay? So, that is why we want to feel all things. Okay? Secondly, to embraces all things. To embraces all things. Now, this is really difficult for people, and I hope that you can stick with me on this, and I hope that we're on the same page. Embraces all things. So, let's just talk of my day today, okay? I see events that are occurring in my field of awareness, my glimmering pool of awareness, okay? I see our president speaking today, okay? I can see our neighbor here in this complex who was kind of awful today, okay? I see people in traffic coming back here from Palm Beach and looking quite unhappy, okay? And kind of an angst that they experience, okay? All of these are happening in time and space. It's happening in my field of awareness. And it's happening in my field of awareness because, number one, I have either miscreated it, that event, or I have created it lovingly in my field of awareness. Okay. I have to embrace all things that has already occurred because, number one, it's already in the past. Okay, it's already done and over with. So I can't correct what has already been done. Okay? But I can't be at war with it either. I can't be in conflict with anything that is happening in the field of awareness. And so, in order for me to dissolve those divisions, those lines and boundaries, I have to embrace with lovingly a heart to everything, an event, and every circumstance that is happening in time and space. Because the moment that I don't embrace it, then I reject it in that moment. And when I deny it and reject it, guess what? It comes back. And we see the ripples or the effects of those chosen notions that we are entertaining at any moment. Embracing all things. Trusts all things. So, let me say it this way. I trust God implicitly. That is, my best friend Esteban was asking me the other day, Kevin, do you have, where is your percentage of conviction and commitment to what we are teaching through the Academy of Spiritual Awakening? And initially, I was honest with Esteban. I said, okay. I initially said, about 90% commitment there. I believe that. And then a little later on in the text, because he's in China at this moment, I said, okay, maybe from time to time I can bring that from 90 to about 50%. But hey, even 50% commitment, 50% of conviction, 50% of confidence is enough in itself to bring us to an awareness of God's love that has been gifted to us in time and space. And I hope, my holy brother, Esteban, and I hope it's true with you as well, then we can bring that 50% up to about 90, 95%, 90, 99% in our experience. Because our conviction, our faith, and our belief and confidence is 100% important in moving ourselves moving forward in time and space with the grace and the love and the peace and the bliss and the joy. That is the reason why we are even here in time and space, to extend those things, those fruits of the Spirit, to a world that believes themselves to be in a sleep state. Okay? That we call fear. Fear. Trusts all things and then allows all things. We allow all things because it's already over and done with. Again, when we are in a conflict with it, we will deepen it in our experience. We will perpetuate it. Okay? All right. So let me give you one more. Let me look here to see if there's any questions here on my iPad. Just, give me a moment. Guz, I have been facing my fears and felt like my ego was dying. It was difficult. Okay, I want to make sure I got your whole question there. Let me look again here. I have been facing my fears and felt like my ego was dying. It was difficult. Okay, a couple of things here, Guz. And that is, first of all, you have to face your fears. And the reason why we are facing it directly is because unless we do look at it and acknowledge that we have ourselves miscreated it, then, as I said earlier, it's going to perpetuate in our lives over and over again. But it's easy, though, as I look at it directly, then that fear begins to dissolve and disappear into the nothingness from which it was born. The moment that I take a decision in my mind to choose again, to choose once again, to know in that moment that I am in this moment believing the notion that I am alone and separate from our source, that I am separate from my brothers and sisters in time and space. When we choose again and see that we are one with our source, that we are one with our brothers and sisters, you know what happens, Gus? The fear begins to dissipate. Because love comes to reign instead, in its place. And then fear begins to go to nowhere, where it came from. Gus, also, separately as well, you said that, let me go back to your question here. I'm looking for it here. You said that here it is. It was difficult, and that you felt like your ego was dying. There's a reason why you initially experienced that difficulty. Is because when you begin to, and you're going to especially experience this when you go through the first 50 lessons in A Course in Miracles, the ego begins to rail against you. Because in reality, what is happening is that you are beginning to dismantle the very being that you yourself have created in your mind. You are beginning to take your sledgehammer to what is not even true. Okay? And so the ego begins to rail against you for doing that experience. So when you go through the first 50 lessons then, after that, the voice of love begins to emerge within the lessons, and you see that notion that you are separate from your brothers and sisters, the notion that you are separate from your source, begins to disappear, and that railing from the ego begins to silence within your mind. You don't begin to experience yourself as not hearing it as prevalently as you have been in the past. Gus, I hope that I have answered your question here. Let me look here. Okay. Okay, so Diane Fergella, I hope I said that last word okay. So everything and everyone is a projection. Very good question, Diane. So let me explain this in two levels. From A Course in Miracles, it tells us that God projected itself to the world, to the real world, okay? That divine projection or extension was valid, was divine. Okay, what happened after that initial projection or extension of God's love to his creation? Then what we did is we listened to that voice of fear, okay? We entertained that voice of fear. We saw it in that moment, in that instant, as a serious event, which it is not. The moment that we give our attention to that event of fear, then we goes into a sleep state. And when we go into that sleep state, okay, then we begin to project outwardly what is happening inwardly. So what is happening inwardly? It is a belief, an idea that we entertain briefly, that fear is real, that the separation is real, and the moment that we give our attention to those two things, boom, we are asleep immediately, okay? And then we begin to traffic in blame and attack, and we see ourselves on a battlefield and a war. And because of that, we continue to be in a sleep state. Now, I'm not here to judge anybody who's sleeping, okay? Just let them sleep if they want to sleep. That's okay. But anybody who wants to be awakened has to understand the theoretical foundation of what occurred to bring us to this dream state right now. Okay, Diana? I hope that I've answered your question as well. If you have any other questions here, just let me know. I think I have responded to most everybody else here. I want to finish one more thing here. I've got about 5 minutes here, and then I'll go dark here. Where the way of mastery says you will discover the pathway of awakening is not a pathway of avoidance, but a pathway of trustfulness. It is not a pathway of accomplishments and pride, but a pathway of releasing from the consciousness every hope and every wish to be special. To see yourself as having made progress so that you can pound a fist upon the chest and spread your tail feathers. It is a transcendence of the hope of somehow getting God's attention, so that he will look upon you and say, oh, you have been such a good person. Yes, we will allow you into the kingdom now. Okay, that is not the voice of love. That is not the voice of God. That is the voice of fear. That is the voice of the ego. So let me take a few moments here to really review a few statements from that portion from the Way of Mastery. Awakening is not a pathway of avoidance. So, avoidance occurs in our mind when we begin to avoid anything that is happening in our field of awareness. We are essentially saying to ourselves, hey, that event is unacceptable to me. I don't like what's that's happening in time and space right now. And so I will avoid it. I will not looking at it. And the moment that I avoid it and do not want to look at it fully, and guys, and by the way, that is what the fellow asked earlier this evening as well. It is a process of giving avoidance and rejection to what ourselves have miscreated in time and space. So enlightenment is not a pathway of avoidance. It's about looking at things that we ourselves have miscreated or created directly and take 100% responsibility for what we either have miscreated or created in time and space. Enlightenment is not a pathway of accomplishments and pride. You know, the moment I read that this morning, I saw what I remembered what C.S. Lewis once said, that I don't want anything new to happen to me. I'm not looking around the next corner or over the next hill. I'm here now, and that's enough. Look, the kingdom is experienced here and now. Enlightenment is an experience that you can have right now. Nirvana can be experienced right now. And the notion that nirvana or heaven or enlightenment is in the future is what keeps us asleep and not awake right now. Okay? It is not a pathway of accomplishments and pride, but a pathway of releasing from the consciousness every hope and every wish to be specialness, to be special. Look, the whole specialness that we entertain almost on a daily basis is the reason why it is so arrogant and egoic and based upon the voice of fear. That is it. Look, this is not about Kevin Rice being special. It's not about Trisha, for instance, to be special. How do we remove ourselves from that notion that when I in this Facebook Live, for instance, give you a shiny object called Kevin Rice, then you are missing the mark entirely. Then you are missing the mind of Christ that is extending to yourself right now in this moment. It's not about Kevin Rice. It's not about Trisha. It's not about Diane. It's not about all of those things. It's about us, you and I, connecting to our source. About connecting to our soul. Connecting to our spirit. And then when we do that, then we can express it lovingly to the world. Then our experience is without sadness, without suffering, without conflict. Look, specialness from the ego's perspective is about exclusion. God's specialness is about inclusion, so that all the children of God is special in its inclusion, in its holiness, in its sacredness. That is where God's specialness occurs. The ego's specialness comes from exclusion. I'm special, you're not. Look at me right now. I'm happy and you're not. That is specialness. Hi, Carol Grant. It's good to see you, my holy sister. And what you are doing, by the way, with your path and your journey is wonderful, by the way. People should check out Carol Grant on her page as well on Facebook. Folks, I think that I have covered everything here on this Facebook Live today. Let me just look here. Trisha. Good to see you, Trisha. I love you so much. I think you're in Australia here. Says, I love you, Kevin, and all my brothers. Hugs from Australia. Diane. So who is creating the world asleep? You are, Diane. You are creating a world asleep. Well, when I say you, I am referring to a collective self that we have collectively and individually have created a sleep state merely by giving attention to a hallucination, What is the hallucination? The whole idea, the notion, the fallacy that you and I are separate from each other. The moment that we believe this, even for a moment, we go into a dream state. I said it earlier in Facebook Live, and you can watch this anytime. It's on the post here, my page. That the only venue in which an illusion, the separation, can be afforded reality is within a dream state. So we go into that sleep state, that dream state, the moment that we believe that the separation, that something is outside of me instead of inside of me. That's when we are asleep, okay? So, I could give you another example, but I'm going to stop right there. Okay, Diane, I hope that I have answered your question. How do we wake up? Diane, this is really easy too. How do we wake up? That we let go of the voice of fear. We let go of any notion or fallacy that the separation in any way, shape, or form is real. Okay? And then we choose again. We see things happening in our field of awareness that is arising in our field of awareness. We can look at it and say, yeah, I see that energy. I see that conflict there, that energy, but I can choose again in this moment. I can choose again. I can choose instead when I align myself with the thoughts of God, the thoughts of love, the thoughts of life, and then I can express and extend that to the world. That is when we begin to awaken ourselves from that dream state. And by the way, Diane, the way that you will know that this occurs is when you see yourself lucid dreaming in this experience. Having a lucid dream state. What is a lucid dreaming state? It's a state in which we are aware that we are dreaming a dream. That's it. We're not just a participant within the dream, but we are instead the dreamer of the entire dream. And this is why 100% responsibility rests within me. It's not about you. It's not about the world. It's about my mind and my ability to change my mind in that moment. Diane? Okay, here we have another question from you. So if I do that myself, it will all change. Yes, it will change. Your experience in the world begins to change. Your experience begins to have a reminiscent nature of love that begins to emerge within your being. So yeah, it does change. Okay? The world is nothing more, Diane, than an outward expression of what is happening inwardly. And when we begin to change what's happening inwardly, my experience outwardly begins to change accordingly. Okay? Yes, those changes occur when you have the belief and the conviction and the confidence that this is true, that love is true, and everything else is ancillary. Okay, this is the beginning of A Course in Miracles, right? I can just review it here really briefly here. It's very small. In the beginning of A Course in Miracles here. And I'll get it here 1 second here. Right here. Okay, it's right here. I'll get it here. Be patient, folks. Right here. Here it is. This is A Course in Miracles, Diane. It is a required course. Only the time you take it is voluntary. Free will does not mean that you can establish the curriculum. It means only that you can elect what you want to take at a given time. The course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance. The opposite of love is fear, but what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. And this is what, Diane, I really wanted you to understand this here. This course can therefore be summed up very simply in this way. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. And herein lies the peace of God. Nothing real, fear, can be threatened. Nothing unreal, let me restate that. I think it did incorrectly there. Nothing real can be threatened, love. Nothing unreal, fear, exists. And herein lies the peace of God. Okay, Diane, I hope that I answered that question from you as well. Okay, I think I did. And by the way, I did see Guz here, the whole thing here. It says, I have been facing my fears and felt like my ego was dying. It was difficult. Felt like Christ on the cross. Soon I felt my mind stop. Then I felt like I was like a new child, like someone else was observing with my eyes. This is what happens, Guz, is when you step back and you allow the light within you to step forward, to lead you to an awareness of God's love within your identity, and then you begin to express it. Yeah, it does feel like you are observing, that you are a witness, okay? You kind of step back from your body and your narratives and your storylines and so forth, and then you begin to see life more holistically, okay? Okay, boy, I hope that answered the question, Guz. All right, I think, okay, Tricia, I got you. Thank you, Diane. Thank you so much. Folks, listen, look, it really helps the Academy of Spiritual Awakening, not to enrich Kevin Rice or anybody else or part of the Academy as well. It is here to extend the light of God to the world. Every time you like and share this post to your page. This will help the Academy of Spiritual Awakening. We are extending and expressing the love of God to everybody. And by the way, I want to thank everybody who has donated to the Academy of Spiritual Awakening, either through the website, theacademyofspiritualawakening.org, or here on Facebook Live. Thank you so much for your donations. It does help to extend and to extend the love of God to the world that is in desperate need of it, okay? And I'm here also for counseling as well. If you need counseling with me, give me a call. Just email me here, choose once again, at gmail.com. You can connect with me as well through the Academy's website. Folks, if no one has told you today that they love you, allow me to be the first. I love you so much, and you are pure light.